Now we're live. Welcome everybody to the second session of Success Skills Unwrapped webinar series. Today's training is in conjunction with Workplace Education Manitoba. And we'd like to acknowledge that the funding is provided by the Government of Canada and the Manitoba government. Today, your speaker is going to be Julie Bell. For over 30 years, Julie has supported the success of adults in a variety of topics, including communication, train the trainer, mentorship, leadership training, cultural diversity, and many other topics. She has delivered training throughout the province of Manitoba, from Nelson House to Churchill in the north to Altona in the south. Does that rhyme on purpose?
No.
She has delivered courses in person, online, written curriculum, and resources, and trained many other facilitators over the years as well. She is a continuous learner, and she has adult education certificates from the University of Manitoba, the Providence College, the Province of Manitoba, and Workplace Education Manitoba. Julie is passionate about equipping participants with tools for success. Julie and I have known each other for a number of years, but this will actually be one of the first times we have an opportunity to work together, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm now going to pass the stage over to Julie, and as you all know, you can write comments in the comments section. She is going to present, and then we will have a Q&A following that. Here you go, Julie.
Thank you.
Just give me 1 second.
All right.
Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Hold on a sec here. Oh, I guess it is sharing right now. Donna, do you see, did the screen change just now?
Yes, it did change. Okay. Yes, my apologies. I realized I was on mic mute there.
No
Perfect.
Problem. Okay, so odds are very high that you have experienced a communication breakdown in your workplace. We'll just share this little video just to get us warmed up thinking about communication. I don't imagine that your people are accidentally pushing beautiful red sports cars over the cliff in your workplace, but I'm sure there has been many instances where communication has crossed. And just because we've sent a message does not mean that it was received in the manner that we have intended. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to share with you a few little case studies, and then we'll think about some of the communication challenges behind these case studies. Most of them are 100% true stories, just taking out the identifier, so they're strictly anonymous. But first of all, I'm just going to go over our learning goals for time today, is to reflect on real-life examples of communication challenges, discuss elements of communication that impact our workplaces, and then finally, we'll leave with some tips for our never-ending quest for improved communication, including your role in the workplace and how you can impact that. There is no graduation. There's no point when organizations go, we have achieved it. We now have excellent communication. But just because the goal is never within reach doesn't mean it's not worth our attention to constantly pursue that, because it makes everything better when our communication is better. A little caveat about this workshop. Many of the examples are cross-cultural. So one of my certifications is I'm a certified cross-cultural diversity expert. I've done a lot of training in very diverse workplaces. And so many of my examples include diversity. So this doesn't necessarily mean that these communication problems are only within diverse workplaces, but I think you'll see the parallels wherever you are. First scenario, communication in the field. So a farmer who lives in the Steinbach area hired a number of workers to weed a field. He gave instructions and asked if they understood. They said yes. The farmer left and came back 3 days later. The workers had pulled all the weeds, and as well, they had pulled the entire crop that had cost $7,000. And yeah, 100% true story. And that's not his profits. That's how much it cost him to buy the plants. So he actually lost a lot more money. And we will explore how this was a very costly communication breakdown and what happened then. Another scenario I recently heard of, a newer employee was given the task of destroying files older than 2015. And she permanently destroyed all files newer than 2015. And I was told they are gone. They are destroyed. So another very, very unfortunate communication breakdown, which we will look at. Next scenario, an employer newer to Canada was asked to do a task. Her supervisor said, "It would be great if you could help us with this task." The newer employee did not do the task and was shocked when she found out that the supervisor was disappointed that she didn't do it. So what is going on there? We will also take a closer look at this situation. Anani is from Zimbabwe. I've changed the name. Growing up, her parents and grandparents did not sit down and directly give her advice, but they did tell her a lot of stories. Anani, even as a young girl, had to think very carefully about the stories that she was hearing. So I'm going to talk about what is going on there. Like, why would they not give her advice? What's going on with this communication? One more. Mary has a master's degree and was a professional in London, England for 20 years. She came to Canada and quickly got an education coordinator position in an organization for professionals. And when I received emails from her, they were very formal and professional. And she used professional expressions that we don't use in Canada. And one thing I didn't add here, didn't put in writing, is that people really were misunderstanding her a lot and assuming that she was quite uppity, quite snobby. And eventually her job ended. So one more now. This one actually is not based on a true story, but happens a lot. Mr. Jones said, "It looks like we're going to have to keep the production line running on Saturday." And Mr. Wu said, "I see. Can you come in on Saturday?" "Yes, I think so." "That'll be a great help." "Yes. Saturday is a special day. Did you know?" "How do you mean?" "It's my son's birthday." How nice. I hope you all enjoy it very much. Thank you. I appreciate your understanding. Mr. Wu did not show up that Saturday, and Mr. Jones was very disappointed. So those are all of the little case studies, and we're going to revisit all of them, looking at them through the lens of some communication elements. The first one is I want to talk about this question, do you understand? Now, I'm the first one to admit that I use this question a lot. I use it. It's very, very common. My father-in-law, he knows I talk about them in the workshops. I'll tell him, I talked about you again. He is a mumbler. He mumbles all the time. So I am not constantly going, "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I don't understand." There are times when I just kind of nod my head like I do understand. And then there are times when he's like, "Okay, let's meet and drop off the kids at," and then he'll say this place and I'll be like, "I'm sorry, I just don't understand." But a lot of times I am nodding my head. I am deciding in my mind, "Oh, that probably wasn't that important," and I'm just nodding. This happens all the time in the workplace and creates So many problems. There's so many reasons why people will not say if they don't understand. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want you to look stupid. They're busy and they want you to go away. So and so many more reasons. And I tell you, the problem after problem, the stories I hear of this one question alone. So open-ended questions, especially when giving instructions, will save you a sea of trouble. What can we ask instead of do you understand? Like any question that really has a yes, no. Do you understand? Is that clear? Any questions? That is basically a breakdown in communication, because people will probably say, yes, that's clear. Yes, they understand. No, they don't have any questions. Now, should we never ever ask these questions in the workplace? Well, that would be impossible. I still do it all the time. But the thing is, the real key is to follow it up with those open-ended questions to really make sure that people understand. So asking people to repeat back is will just save you a lot of trouble. I find when I practice in workshops, we'll actually do these simulations where I'll pretend I'm the supervisor and giving instructions. And if I give 2 or 3 steps and we're practicing in the class, people don't remember all the steps. And very often, leaders are giving 2 or 3 steps when they're giving instructions because they're busy. And so getting people to repeat back. I always also encourage people, get a notebook, encourage people to write down what you've said. That would just be really helpful. Or just getting people to show you. So let's go back to the farmer and the person who was asked to get rid of files. If that farmer or that office worker had just taken an extra moment, show me the weeds, show me the real plants. Think of, like, I don't know what the profit margin is on $7,000 worth of crops, but like that would have turned into a lot of profits. And same thing with the files, if they've just taken a little bit of extra time to really make sure they understood. I was doing leadership training once in a company, and one of the supervisors, he was really fighting back. He was just like, I don't have time for this. I'm a busy guy. I have a lot of stuff going on. And he was working in the shipping department. And I was like, I don't know if you have time for people to load stuff on the wrong truck. 1 week later, we got together again, and he, in front of the whole class, said, I tried it. And he said, it has saved, he said, my department is now 20% more efficient. It's like the department is running itself by just taking that little bit of extra time. Okay, so that's the first couple of case studies. Let's look at another situation. Direct and indirect communication. So, what is the difference between these types of communication? And we will tie this back to another one of our case studies. What one means is stated very straightforward and direct manner when you are directly communicating. There is no beating around the bush. Directness is equated with honesty and respect for the other person. So, if you are communicating with someone who you know is a direct communicator, it is really great. It's great to respect the other person's time. Don't create ambiguity or uncertainty by avoiding the issue, and be straightforward. That's the kind of communication that this person will respect. A lot of leaders really appreciate direct communication. Not that you're disrespectful, but just, not beating around the bush, because they've got a lot going on. Not all leaders, but there's a lot of leaders that appreciate this. Indirect communication, the meaning is conveyed by subtle means, such as nonverbal behavior, parables and stories, suggestions and implication. Indirectness is equated with politeness and respect for the other person. So when you're communicating with someone who is more of an indirect communicator, respecting the other person's feelings, and don't put the other person on the spot by being too direct. Okay, now, here's a little secret about Canadian culture from my vantage point. I think that typically Canadians are far more indirect than they think they are. I think that we self-identify as being quite direct, when in fact we are not. We are We do a lot of softeners. We go, oh, if it's not too much of a problem, I'm just wondering if maybe you consider doing this, because we don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. We use the sandwich approach to giving feedback. We say something positive, something negative, and then something positive. We sandwich it in the middle to help people to feel better. This can be very, very confusing for, first of all, people who are learning English, but also people coming from some other cultures that are more direct. So going back to this scenario where this person, she's from Nigeria, and she said that her supervisor came up to her and said, I would suggest, maybe you could do this. And she said, oh, well, if I have an option, then yeah, I'm not going to do it. She didn't realize that actually her boss was actually telling her to do something because of this indirect style of communication that we have. So it's just another example of how communication can really go. Just because we sent a message does not necessarily mean that it will be received. All right. Next scenario, communication is more than words. Now, we're going to talk about something called low context and high context communication. For those of us, and I'll tell you many, many Canadians are low context. This side will be easy peasy to wrap our heads around. High context might hurt our heads a little, but let's dig in, because I think understanding this can be very helpful. So in low context, the context of the communication is not assumed to be known. Things must be explained clearly and unambiguously. Meaning must be expressed precisely. So in these cases, you communicate clearly, completely, and unambiguously. Just state everything nice and clear. High context. Oh yes, and don't leave any understanding to chance. So you say, get everything out on the table. So it's nice and clear. High context, the context for communication is assumed to be known. Hence, it is unnecessary, even insulting, to explain things and state meaning precisely. So meaning is taken from context. So there's more meaning in how things are set up in a room than in the words. I warned you, this might hurt our heads a little bit because typically in Canada, we're quite low context. So in this case, you respect the other person's understanding of the situation and you leave the understanding to the other person. There are large swaths of the world where high context is a more normal strategy for communication, particularly cultures where there is a lot of tradition, thousands of years of tradition, and there's a lot of ceremony and there's a lot of meaning behind situations. Or even in Canada, we're a little more high context, say in governmental situations and where someone is seated, there's a lot of symbolism, but typically in Canada, we are quite low communicators. And I've heard of scenarios where someone will walk into a supervisor's office and ask a question, and then they'll come out and say to everybody, the boss wants me to quit. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? But they just read it. They didn't hear the words, but they were reading the context and assuming the boss wanted them to quit. And the boss was shocked, like, no, I didn't want that at all. So if we go back to this scenario with Mr. Jones and Mr. Wu, Mr. Wu is from a culture, and there's it's a large populations in the world where it is disrespectful to say no. China, Japan, like huge swaths of populations where to say no would be disrespectful. So in this case, you can see Mr. Wu, he's been asked to come in on Saturday, but he already has plans. But it would be disrespectful to tell his boss that he has plans, or it'd be disrespectful to say that he can't come. So he has this way of coming in and discussing the birthday, hoping that the boss will pick up on the fact that he is not available without disrespecting his boss. So, and here's the thing. Most people are not conscious of their communication styles. It is intuitive. So they don't necessarily know that we are different style of communication. So I mean, people start to figure things out, especially if they have training or they work together longer and longer. But you can really see how there can be just a real misunderstanding. Another scenario I heard about this was a person went to Japan and said, I would like to fly from this city to this city. And the person said, I would highly recommend that you take a train. It's really beautiful. It's along the coast. Oh, no, I want to fly. I could arrange for you to rent a car. No, I want to fly. Well, there's no flights. Like, it's literally impossible. But for that travel agency to say, no, you cannot fly would cause loss of face. That would be embarrassing. So, yeah. All right. Next scenario, reading between the lines. There's linear communicators. That's the first kind. So communication is conducted in a straight line, moving in a linear way toward the main point. Getting to the point is very important, and the point is stated explicitly, and not getting to the point quickly is seen as a time waster. So when you're communicating with these types of communicators, it's important to be brief. You can literally say the point is and get to the point. Provide only as much explanation as the other person needs, and be explicit about the main points. And do not deviate from the main point. Then there's people who are more circular communication. Communication is conducted in a circular manner around the main points. The point may be left unstated because the verbal and nonverbal information provided is sufficient for understanding. And stating the point explicitly is seen as insulting the other person. So in communicating with circular communication, circular communicators never preface a comment with the point is. Embellish your stories with stories and anecdotes and let the story make the point. Let the other person infer the meaning of your comments from the story. So going back to this scenario, this person told me that she would get advice, but they would never tell her, think carefully about who you marry. Don't go out and party hard. Like the family would never say things like that directly to her. They would be telling these stories. And so to say things directly for some people can be received as offensive. One more. Email. All these topics we could say a lot. We're being very, very brief on them. But email is formulaic, but not everyone knows the formula. Now, up until this point, a lot of the stuff that I shared with you is based on a lot of research. I'm actually quoting diversity experts, for example. What I'm about to share to you is kind of Julie Bell ideas, just from going to a number of workshops, having conversations with a number of people. You might disagree with what I'm about to share. So this is just my personal theory about the secret to Canadian email. I've seen people get fired over this stuff where they didn't know this formula. At least that's the theory I have. There's a couple scenarios where I'm pretty sure that it caused them to lose their jobs. I can think of 3 examples in my mind. So what's the Canadian formula? I don't know. Does anyone here, if you're the age, like I remember the first email that I wrote. Prior to that, we were using like this manufacturing system called the AS400, and we were sending messages through that. But I remember looking at my first email and writing it. And so it's a very new thing. And this culture of writing email has emerged that is quite different from other countries. So the formula that I have noticed in Canada, it's a blend. It's professional, but friendly. Very important to be both professional and friendly and thorough, getting all the important details, but also succinct. Not a super long email. Like some cultures, I've seen the email can be quite long for the same message. And timely. And by timely, I mean, I have made this mistake where someone sends me an email and I have to do a lot of thinking, but sending an email going, Thanks for your email. It'll take me a few days to get you an answer. That's also something that seems to be very important in our Canadian email style. So the ingredients. This is the formula that I have noticed. And if anyone disagrees with me, I'd be very, very curious about that. First of all, an informal greeting like hi or hello. Dear sir is, I don't know if you go back in your email and look at all the emails you've written the last couple of weeks, I don't know if there'll be one dear sir. I think it's quite common in other cultures, but I don't think it's part of our Canadian formula. A little personal message at the beginning, like I hope this email finds you well. Hope you're having a good day, something like that. Even how are you? And then that nice, clear, concise message, like I just talked about. And then saying thanks, even if there's nothing to be thankful for. And then finally, our name. Or maybe cheers, which I'm not comfortable with. I wish I was, but it's not my style. And if we don't put any of these things in, if we don't follow these formulas, we can think, oh, well, that person's snobby. Oh, well, that person's grouchy. Because the trouble with email and texting and all of that is we are inferring the tone of the person's voice based on what we know about that person, or maybe how we're feeling that day, or some combination. So there is just so much potential for misunderstanding when we are putting things into print. And the trouble with email is forever. We don't know who gets forwarded email. Like, we have lost control once a communication by email goes out. And that's why pausing before we communicate this way and making sure that we are not in the red zone and saying things we wouldn't normally is very, very important. So that's email. So going back to Mary, you can imagine now following her formula for writing email, which was very professional, very formal, that people were assuming that she was a snob, that she was higher than them. And really, she was just following a formula that works perfectly in London. And of course, is there a culture that's better than another culture? Of course not. But the key is, if I was to go to England, I would also have to modify my communication style when I'm there as well. So just a few communication tips here at the end, just kind of pulling together all of our thoughts. So using those open-ended questions, or following up a closed-ended question, like, do you understand? Is that clear? Do you have any questions? Following that up with open-ended questions. So what do you think? What's your plan? Can you tell me what you're going to do? Keep that communication going, even if it takes a couple extra minutes. It'll save you a sea of trouble. Apply the platinum rule. Now, maybe as I'm going through it and I'm making suggestions about how to adapt our communication, you're like, really, do I have to go to all that work? I'm going to give you a selfish motive for that. When we treat others the way they need to be treated, which is the platinum rule and not the golden rule, it gives us the communication advantage. We are in control of communication, and we can shape it. So I would suggest being the one that modifies and adapts towards other people. It's really in our best interest. And when it comes to things like communication styles and email, people don't know what they don't know. Like, we can think, well, what's the matter with them? Why aren't they communicating? I'm going to share with you one more model, and it's called the learning ladder, just to show how we are all moving up the ladder when it comes to communication. So we can be at the very, very bottom, unconsciously unskilled. I don't know that I don't know. I'm going to give you an example in just a second of all of these. We can move up the ladder towards consciously unskilled. Oh, I know that I don't know. If we keep going up the ladder, then we move towards I know that I know. And then finally, we can go to I don't know that I know. So let me give you just a quick example of what that can look like when it comes to communication. We can go to, it's going backwards. I'll just read it this way. At the bottom, I've never thought about the fact that answering the phone at work should be different than at home. maybe a person comes to the workplace, they just literally never thought about it before. So they don't know how to, but they never even realized that there was a difference. That's, I don't know that I don't know. If they move up the ladder, they can go towards, I can hear the difference between casual and professional calls. I don't know how to sound professional. I'm shy. So you have this awareness, but you don't know actually what to do. If you move up to the next level, I think through everything when I answer the phone, using professional tone, smiling, maybe saying my name, saying, can I help you? But maybe you have to write it down or just really think it through. If we get to the top of the ladder, we move towards, I sound professional on the phone. I smile when talking on the phone because it affects our tone. I use a higher tone of voice. I don't even think about it. Why doesn't everyone else? This is common sense. So it's important to remember, as soon as you think something is common sense, that probably means you're at the top of the ladder. None of us came out of our mother's womb knowing about clear communication. We've all learned it. And if you think something is common sense, you are probably in a position to mentor and coach and support other people and help them on their communication journey. So that's my presentation. Successful employees are at the top of the ladder in many ways, and forget that communication skills are only common sense when you get good at them. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Did it work? Okay.
There you go. Excellent. Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. I appreciate you walking through all those different areas. The thing that makes me, when you're doing that is, would it be fair to say that not every workplace is exactly the same?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so what are some ideas that you could have in regards to considering when we're onboarding? What are some things that employers or workplaces could do from an onboarding perspective to address this conversation around communication?
A couple of things. We have our policies and we have our procedures. And policies and procedures, some people might think that's kind of boring, but it actually shapes the culture of an organization. And that's why I always believe that policies and procedures should be living and breathing documents that we revisit and look at them. So those are very important. But then really making sure that people understand those things is really important, which leads into the onboarding orientation process.
Mm-hmm.
We're notorious in Canada for having orientation that's way too short. And then people are just kind of have to figure things out. And to top it all off, most of our job postings will say duties as assigned. So there's just so much opportunity for communication to break down. Mm-hmm. Another thing is to think about the unwritten rules. There are unwritten rules in every organization. Some things will get you fired. Like I say, those 3 cases where I can think people were let go because of how they were writing their emails, there's nothing written down in any policies. And probably they didn't get the information that they needed, the coaching that they needed. And one other thing, go ahead.
No, and even the thing about the unwritten rules is that, sometimes we go about, someone being let go, but the simplicity of it is that when we don't understand some of those unwritten communication rules or unwritten policies and procedures, it does impact the way we communicate. And as we both know, then it impacts the way we problem solve. It impacts the way we trust ourselves in our reading and our writing. And we definitely know that it squishes our creativity and innovation in the workplace, right? And so somebody might end up staying in this space and they made one boo-boo, like one small thing they just never even knew. And it has these huge ramifications for their entire career. So it's really looking at this concept of, communication and really understanding the domino effect that it has throughout, and really when people use the word common sense, I wonder if that's even a word we should have anymore in our workplaces, because common sense means I'm common, my stuff makes sense and yours doesn't, maybe, right? Like what are your takes on even that language of common sense?
I hear it a lot in workshops. Like people will go, well, isn't this common sense? And that just shows me, okay, you either are at the top of the ladder or you think you're at the top of the ladder. Because I do know some people that thought they had common sense. It didn't go well for them. But I just try to teach people that that's a cue for them that they need to be patient with other people.
Right, but it's even more than patience to me. Actually, it's even questioning whether or not it makes sense. So I'm sitting in Ireland with a person who's from a European country, Eastern European country, and I want to take my coffee out of brunch. And he says, Donna, to me, that's stealing. I go, what are you talking about? I just didn't finish my coffee. Why would I not take it to the lunchroom? Take it to our meeting room? Stealing. So common sense would be to me, if I haven't finished my coffee, I pick it up, take it to the room. Why would I waste it? And so when we start talking about communication, like, his comment, and every time I have that opportunity to sit with people and learn from people who have different upbringings in different places of the world and different stories, that is where I believe we can really become better communicators. When we really start to hone in, like, what can I learn from that other person? What can I learn that's not been part of my journey? I'm going to put up a question we have from one of our participants. Is that okay?
For sure.
Beautiful. Here.
Which communication style would be more relevant in Canadian workplaces given the diversity of employees? Oh boy. This is a very complex question, because direct communication for Canadians is considered very disrespectful, but indirect communication is hard to understand. So I think that we can do the indirect communication, but just really make sure people understand, get their feedback. What did I hear? Also, some things, if they're really important, you should be communicating more than one way. So giving that verbal communication and maybe writing some stuff down for people, that can also help. Yeah. For example, instructions.
Right. But, you and I both done lots of tutorials and writings on those things. And you and I have both seen many that don't even make sense because they're missing 10 steps because they're common sense, right? So, one of the things to really ponder as we start to talk about communication is the value of, some people say in Canada, people are so indirect, don't even know what they want. I can't even tell. And then from certain other parts of the world, they're like, when you tell them they're direct and indirect, like, oh, that's the reason I'm struggling at work. I never could identify it. Sometimes this conversation we're having is that light bulb moment for someone to actually say, oh, I get it now. And so if in this moment, somebody who is here has that light bulb moment, that's brilliant, because once we can start to understand that can be the challenge, indirect to direct communication, it's not about me being good at communicating or bad at communicating. It's really, I just communicate a little differently. And how is it that you and I, like if Julie and I were working together, how is it that we can communicate in a way? And also, what needs to be direct? There's a fire. Please leave the building. There's certain times when you're going to get strong directives. And I think that's all part of the onboarding of understanding when you get a directive versus when we want to be more of that creative, innovative, working together, collaborative. What do you think of that? The ability for us to differentiate communication from collaborative versus a need for directive. Do you think there's a need for that in the workplace of today?
Oh, absolutely. But I think, like, if we are checking to make sure people understand, we just have to constantly be checking in.
Yes.
Constantly be checking in. Otherwise, all kinds of things can go awry. Like the sandwich approach to giving feedback, that positive, negative, positive. I mean, it's taught in the Asper School business. It's practiced in Toastmasters. It is so, and I'm not saying that we should throw away these more indirect styles, because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We're nice, but just the follow up and checking for clarification is vital in the situations. Because I was training once some internationally educated IT professionals, and I shared them an example of the sandwich approach. You're doing a great job. Really happy to have you here. I just noticed that you're a little behind on schedule. If you could work on that, that'd be great. But thanks so much for all you do. And it was about, over the course of several workshops, it was about 100 internationally educated IT professionals, very good English. 99 of them thought that was positive. And one person said, oh, that's negative. I learned about that already. 99 of them would have missed the correction.
Right. So when we start to think about the idea here about communicating to create opportunities, communicating to learn, communicating what somebody actually needs, we need to consider, you talk about the fact of linear versus circular, right? Sometimes when we start talking, though, about that ability to be innovative and to be creative, we may think we start off linear, but we have to become comfortable moving to circular. And then we need to become circular then to deciding when is the right time. And we don't have enough time to go into all of that today. But one of the things to realize is there isn't one thing. And you talk about that ability to be able to do the treat others the way we want to be treated. But in order to do that, we actually need to be able to listen to people. We need to understand what someone else needs and what they want. And that takes us getting out of it takes us understanding that communication isn't always linear. It isn't always circular, isn't always direct, isn't always indirect. Those who know me know I'm very comfortable with direct communication. I much prefer it. I don't understand. I definitely can see things and I can understand that sandwich effect. But I'd rather I always have preferred when I've been working with someone, they say, Dawn, I'm not happy about something that happened yesterday. I go, great, let's talk about it. Because now we're there. We're not done it in a negative way, but I know many people that's as my mom would say, that's not their cup of tea, right? So it's understanding different people and working our way through it. What about the word all? We have to share all information. A couple times if I pick that up today, and how realistic is it really when we start talking about communicating and newcomers to have all the information?
Yeah. It is really hard, especially if we're at the top of the learning ladder and there is a lot that is assumed. So I think just really providing ample opportunity for questions. It's really, really important. And when you were talking also about the listening, toggling between the two different listening skills, that active and proactive. So active is like really making sure that we're hearing people, but proactive is those probing questions. And tell me more about that. There is a book called, I think it's called The End of Diversity as We Know It by Martin Davidson.
Okay.
He talks about this person who was working kind of a reception job at his company, and she was kind of quirky. People thought she was kind of odd. She didn't really fit in anywhere, but he took the time to really get to know her and learn about her ways. And like her thinking would just be like, it was not linear by any stretch. She would be talking, and then all of a sudden she's off in another direction. Well, in the end, he discovered that she had ideas for a new clothing line that were so innovative that actually they launched an entire clothing line based on the ideas from this receptionist, because he took the time to really get to know him.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It does. It takes that intentional effort. So when you start thinking about individuals that are either newcomers or sort of entering the workforce, right? I mean, I know they're different and yet similar because it's a new space.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a couple of tips that you could give somebody when they're starting a new job, what might they be from a communication perspective? I know what mine might be. I'm just wondering what yours might be.
If someone is starting a new job, I would, first of all, tell them to become very, very well versed with all the print material, all the website material that they have, and to really become very familiar with the mission and the vision and the values, to find out not only what the organization is at, but where the organization's going. Because the mission and the vision is not usually where the company is. And then so they can adapt to that culture and that organization and kind of get on the path. So the more that they read up on this stuff, the more that they'll have a head start. Also, if they aren't assigned a mentor, most workplaces here don't have a mentorship program, which is unfortunate because it's one of my favorite organizations in Winnipeg. Everyone has a mentor from the top to the bottom.
Beautiful.
Everybody. And they meet with their mentors once a month, and it's one of the most amazing organizations that I've worked with. And so if there isn't that system really to ask, can I have somebody that can be my mentor, not just for the technical questions, but just the where do I sit in the cafeteria, or if I have questions about this. So it kind of is a shortcut to really getting integrated into companies. So to be proactive and ask for that can really be helpful. Those are my ideas. What about you?
For myself, I don't know if I would have done this directly when I started working, but maybe after my second job. So I'll go with it from there. How do I approach you when I have questions? How do you like to be approached? And I also like to understand how the company, or actually not the company, because I don't think it's company centric usually. I think it's more department centric. How do we use emails? And I'd like you to explain to me the thinking and the writing. You discussed some of the writing format of it, but and thinking behind it. But I really like to understand. And then they may tell me things like, if something's an emergency, don't email me because I get so many, I haven't seen it. And so it does sort of start to create. But one of the things I really find interesting is, have we taught our teams how we're actually going to communicate with email? Have we taught them whether or not we like getting texts? Do you enjoy getting messages through, like, some people have Facebook and I know they check it, but I never get a response from email from them. But I know if I send them a message through Facebook or another social media, they're like, click, click, they're right on it, right? So is that an acceptable form in our office? Even though I know I can get a response, is it something that's okay for me to do? Do we reach our customers? How do we work together? But it really is an interesting thing when we start to talk about for better communication in the workplace. And initially you said that we never graduate from this. Can you explain more of that? I think that might be a nice thing for us to really ponder, because probably have some people on here who have been in their jobs and they have been doing a good job, and they say, like, I'm good at this, but how is it? What do you think? Can you ever graduate from it?
I mean, every organization I work with struggles. I haven't come across an organization that's super good at it yet. When you know better, you do better, right? I just think that, we don't decide, I'm not going to eat nutritiously because I don't know how to eat 1,000% nutritiously. We don't just go, well, it's all or nothing. We make baby steps, right? And it makes our life better. And it helps us deal with our health. And the same way, like the communication, it takes a lot of energy, but constantly having to put out fires because somebody misunderstood an email, and now these, all of those misunderstandings, and now the wrong product is on the wrong truck, or, that to me is way more work than trying to put some effort into improved communication. So it's the lesser of two evils. It takes effort, but the latter is worse. So.
Right. So one of the things is really the importance of sort of communication through document use, and understanding how the reason for document use, when we're reading, when we're writing, when we're using numeracy or numbers, just really the importance of not undervaluing those communications. So if there's an open text box, how do we communicate? What do we put in there? Have I made sure that the right information is in there? If I don't have the information, am I better to leave it blank or put something in? Like, it's all these small choices that we make on a daily basis that results in those potential fires that you've inferred, right?
Yes.
And so we think about communication as what we're doing right now, but a lot of what's actually happening in the workplace isn't. You and I are communicating behind two screens, right? We're communicating because you have a piece of paper or you've read something. So what are some ideas that you have to that? So you talked a little bit about it, but I'd like more about the actual workflow process and paperwork, because I know that's where struggles occur.
Protocols are very, very different from culture to culture and from workplace to workplace. One error that I see is very common with people newer to Canada, and I'm sure it's other people too, is they don't understand the process, the protocol for dealing with a problem. So for example, in one of my projects right now, I'm training a bunch of people, and this one person, when he communicates with me, he also communicates with the boss. So then the boss thinks there's a big problem, when he doesn't realize that the question simultaneously comes to me and comes to him. And then he's calling me and he's like, what are we doing about this? And I'm like, everything is an emergency, because I think this person doesn't know that you need to communicate directly with that person.
Right.
But I think that's really, really common, where people will go over their boss and communicate with someone higher because they just don't know. They don't know the protocols. And again, these are things that are unwritten. They're not written down. There's a little bit in policy where it'll say, if you have a problem with a coworker, sort it out as best as you can when you go up. But I don't know, a lot of it is unclear. Whereas in cultures with big hierarchy, it's crystal clear who you go to. So it's really confusing here. And then people will make those mistakes. And if you CC someone, even just knowing when to CC person, why have you CC'd the boss? And then all of a sudden people are like, what is going on? So if I CC a boss, I will put an explanation. Just so you know, I have CC'd this person because they have asked to be kept in the loop about this, because otherwise it can cause all kinds of conflict. And so this is something that I've never read to do this. It's something I have, maybe I'm at the top of the ladder in that area, but people who are just getting into the workplace, whether they're younger people who are, born in Canada or newcomers, will be making these mistakes because there's a lot of nuance to it, and it's doubly complicated when it's on email or texting.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we start to think about the idea of communication and its impact on innovation in the workplace, what do you see? What are some opportunities we see there?
Communication and innovation. I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Do you have something in mind first that might trigger me?
No, just the way they go, right? You know what I mean? Like if people all seem to want, like, I want ideas from my team. I want ideas from my team. And people need to give me more, And it's an interesting concept because, like, what's the reason it's not coming?
Yes. Okay. So there are some cultural reasons. And then I'll talk about a tool that I recently used in a training session that was incredible.
Awesome.
I've known about it a long time, but it was one of the most amazing things we did. So whether you not, like, let's say you have a meeting. So communication meetings is a big part of our Canadian work culture. And then, we know it's very expensive because when people are in meetings, they're not being productive and they're being paid this hourly wage. And then the supervisor will go, okay, everybody, I want to know what should we do in this case. And then there's silence. Well, that's because in some cultures, you never, ever speak up in a meeting. It is inappropriate to speak up at a meeting. You cannot risk making the boss feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
The Filipino people call it mapahiya, like you just can't risk that. But then they'll come and talk to you after the meeting, and then the boss will go, why did you say that at the meeting? So I have seen some workplaces that work around that by saying, okay, everybody, I'm going to ask a question. You can pass if you want, but I'm going to give everybody opportunity. And they've kind of broken through some of those cultural barriers. But the one tool that, and maybe some people listening will know about it, but it's the 6 thinking hats, Edward DeBono.
Yes. And,
I was recently training a department, and the supervisor, fantastic supervisor, but just a little newer. And he wasn't really using meetings to communicate. He just didn't know the value of it yet. And so we tried this, and they were getting ready to launch some new software for managing their accounting. And everybody, so with the 6 thinking hats, everybody wears a different color hat. So green hat is creative ideas. White hat is optimistic ideas. Black hat is pessimistic ideas. Like, oh no, this won't work and everybody has a different one. I can't remember all the colors right now. And so we tried it out. And this meeting that they had, this impromptu meeting they had in our training session, I just thought, oh, wow, this is a really creative and innovative department. Well, apparently they've never done anything like that before. And the supervisor almost fell off his chair because he was trying to figure out all this stuff on his own.
Yes.
And he didn't realize all the ideas that came to the table. And so it's a really, really powerful tool. You can even use it just by yourself. Just change hats and force yourself to get out of your ruts, the way that you're thinking. But it's a very powerful communication tool for meetings. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We have a few more minutes here. I just want to see. I give you the opportunity just to any final thoughts you'd like to share with the group in the next couple of minutes, and then I'm just going to do a conclusion for the day. Time is already here. It's hard to believe, hey?
Yeah.
Goes by fast.
Well, I hope people found it helpful. There's so much more we could say. I mean, normally when I'm doing communication workshops, it's a week. So It's just kind of picking and choosing, and there's many topics we didn't even get into, but how conflict impacts communication and rapport in the workplace, respect in the workplace. But just let us know if you have any questions. You can contact us and we can go deeper into those areas.
Yeah, I just, if it's okay, I'd just like to take so building on what Julia said, just a friendly overview that today she spoke about the idea of indirect and direct communication. Understanding your own style and what you're comfortable with is really important if we want to grow and move up the ladder. We talked about low context and high context ideas. And the thing that's interesting about high context is symbolism and our appreciation for it and what it means and how things are set up. And so really understanding whether or not that's something that you've been brought up with, or something that you maybe or understand for your own culture and also for other cultures as well. We also talk about the idea of linear and circular conversations. So just understanding the value they both bring to the situation. It isn't about being one type or the other to have this communication in the workplace. It's really that opportunity of these things all mixing and mingling together. And so I would love you to just realize that you don't have to be one or the other. Really what it is like, in this situation, how is it that I can try this or do this or be this? And to really understand that the word all is impossible. We can never always communicate everything to anybody. So just give yourself some space to understand that when you go and ask questions, it's normal. It's not because you don't know. It's because it's impossible to ask everything, and it's impossible for someone to share everything with you. So just kind of give yourself a break. Be kind to yourself, as Julie said about communication. Be kind, and we'll go from there. So I would be remiss, I think that's the word, I think I'd be remiss to not let you know about the next upcoming sessions. So next time we get together, it's February 20th, and Matt Earhart is going to have an opportunity to talk about the art of finding a job in the Manitoba and Canadian workforce. So just not sure if you've had an opportunity to meet him before, but he is brilliant. We've met, I'll let you know next. You have to come back next time to find out how Matt and I know each other. But I do know that you'll find his work. He does a lot of work from the not-for-profit, from a recruiting perspective. So just want to encourage you to come out to that, and also to book these other days in your calendar, because we would love to have you back. Thank you very much, Julie, for your time. We appreciate your expertise and knowledge that you bring. Without your time and attention, we wouldn't have been able to do this today. So thank you. And also we'd like to thank the IT staff that's behind making everything go today perfectly. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and we will talk to you later. Ciao, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.